I'm Anastasia, or Annie, and for the past 4 years I've studied at a university called British Higher School of Art and Design, which is a branch of Hertfordshire University but located in Moscow, Russia. It is a bit of an unusual situation because the university was British but the environment outside the uni was Russian. To give you a bit of an outline, the university was established about 17 years ago and the fashion course has been up and running for 12 of those. The head of course, Claire, is a Central St. Martin's graduate and has built the program herself, making sure it stays flexible, relevant and changes with the time. Like any other art uni, our first year was Foundation Art and Design course, followed up by 3 years of fashion studies, resulting in a bachelor's degree. You might catch me referring to my years in levels, so for context, level 3 is Foundation, level 4 is year 1 of BA, and so on, so level 6 is the graduating year. So I thought I'd just go through the 4 years of fashion school that I went through so that you can understand exactly how our university cultivated the skills that we got. I also have to mention that prior to studying at BHSAD, I also had some art experience already. As a 9-year-old kid, I took some oil painting classes for a year or two, studied in an art school here in Tallinn for I think a year when I was 15, and then studied in a Russian design and technology college. That might sound like a lot, but in reality that wasn't, especially that last place. Ooh. I did gain some fundamentals from all of those places, but that college was so far from both design and technology, you can't even imagine. That place helped me realize that creativity cannot live in a vacuum and that there is no one specific way to make art, which only made me all the more grateful and appreciative of my foundation year. So let's start at that, foundation. The whole reason why 99% of applicants are sent to a foundation course before their bachelor's is to open up their minds and teach them how to break the boundaries of the norm. I myself did not quite understand the structure of a British art system and was taken aback a little when they suggested I take that course as well, but quickly realized there was a blessing in disguise. For the first 6 months in BHSAD, we studied all 4 disciplines a university had to offer, which were fine art, fashion design, graphic design, and product design. Aside from all that, we also had some live drawing sessions with nude models coming into pose. Those sessions would be very fun because sometimes we would do traditional exercises like sitting on a circle on the floor with our easels and 2 models walking inside of that circle and us depicting their every move in a continuous line. Other times we would draw and paint in a more classical way, but with some room for experimentation. We did rotations of all the pathways that we had and had to submit gigantic A1 portfolios with multiple sketchbooks to about 4 assessments in those 6 months. I have 9 full sketchbooks from that year, and believe me, I never thought I would do this much work in just 1 year, because just like any other artsy person, I used to have a bunch of sketchbooks half empty, which I never finished. After 6 months of rotations, we had to pick our pathway, which for me was fashion, and continue with 3 or so projects before starting our final major project. With this one, we didn't really have any sewing skills just yet, and so we were allowed to use essentially anything to construct the final garment. I actually have a short video of the final thing from that project on my channel, so you can check it out in the top right corner if you're interested. We also had a separate art theory and history class, some fine art lectures, outside of uni project, and a really cool trip to Berlin. There was also a really exciting event organized for us called Big Draw, where we used our bodies as tools and had different fun games involving alternative ways of mark making. So there are a lot of positives from the first year of art school. First of all, I learned how important layering process was. For example, on one of our first projects, we had to go take pictures of old Irish Street in Moscow and then do a bunch of sketches on them in a bunch of different styles. Then we were split into pairs and had to pick 1 or 2 sketches from each of us to collage and then trace onto an acetate sheet with a black marker, overlaying them and creating like a very difficult line work. Then those were transferred to a silkscreen emulsion to be printed through. All those prints alongside our sketches and photos were projected onto a wall with an A0 piece of paper attached to it, and we were grouped into 5 and had to pick and choose what we wanted to do with those projections and create a big artwork on that wall in any technique we wanted. We also did a bunch of mono printing and reverse mono printing, the outcomes of which could also be integrated into that giant art piece. All of that just to get 1 collaborative piece in just 4 days of work total. This project was very early on in that year and it became a really good introduction to how the course would flow. I learned that a sketchbook is a tool for dumping out all of your thoughts on a page and not a book with pretty final images. It truly helped me analyze my work way better and open up my head to alternative ways of my project development that I would get stuck on. I had a sketchbook with me at all times, and even on my trip to Berlin I took it everywhere and I learned to create on the go. Never thought that I could do so much work in one night. I actually enjoyed those 18-hour work days and was so in the zone that for once in my life I didn't feel like I was wasting my time. Art surrounded me every day, and on the weekends all I could think about was working. And to be fair, most of the time I had to do just that because the workload was just extreme, and also my inner overachiever would just not shut up. We had a bunch of inductions to school facilities we could take on, so I learned silkscreen printing, basics of ceramics, photography and videography, etching, mono printing, some editing, spacing, darkroom image exposure, cyanotype, and probably others that I just can't remember. But obviously, with all the positives, there are bound to be some negatives. I was sleep deprived like never before, trying to finish everything to 100 and then add a bit on top. That perfectionist died during foundation, that I'm actually quite glad about. I've realized that perfectionism is not as good of a trait as I've conditioned myself to think over the years. The sleep deprivation was the worst during assessment period, as none of us had everything done in advance because we always found something to work on, and the night before assessment would always be an all-nighter. Sometimes a full week before assessment would be a series of 3 to 4 hour power naps and a full day of work afterwards. I was stressed out like everyone else and legit cried every week, not from cheaters or anything, just from being stressed, tired, annoyed with myself, from feeling inadequate, untalented, comparing myself to others, and criticizing everything that I did. Add in my perception of art flipping upside down and you get yourself a typical art student. So that was a reconstructive experience to say the least. At this point, I had been living in Russia for about 2 years already and had a few friends outside of uni, but I think we hung out about like 6 times that year, most of which would happen in the breaks after assessments we would have, and there was really no social life. If I went out to a cafe, my sketchbook would be there. If my boyfriend and I went to the countryside, I would bring every art supply I had, plus my computer and maybe the current project I was working on if it wasn't too big. That was a bit obsessive, and I'm sure others found a more healthy way of working, but from what I gathered, others were in a very similar situation as me. Those who wanted to succeed and do their best were as stressed out, tired, and unrested as I was, with their occasional coffee breaks accompanied by discussions about our current project, so that was a bit of a loop. Don't get me wrong, it was stressful and challenging, but also the most experimental, fun, and exciting a university can be, in my opinion. I can't remember the last time I came this close to feeling like a child in my adult years as I did on foundation. I can go on and on about this, so if you'd like to hear more in detail everything that I did on foundation, sound off in the comments below, and that can be a separate video afterwards. I want to mention the keywords from foundation. They will be sketchbook, experimentation, stress, productivity, layering, freedom, resilience, and self-expression. So now we can move on to year 1 of bachelor's degree. Before even starting the year, we had 2 girls drop out. One moved to Amsterdam to study in Amphi, and 3 new people joined the group. 2 of those 3 people came back from their gap years, and 1 came from an Italian university with a very different approach to art education, which later became the reason she dropped out. From a studio with over 100 people with different pathways and interests, we moved into a smaller studio with about 16 of us, I think. On foundation, we had our own groups of people and were mostly distant from one another for the majority of that year, but started getting a little bit closer when we worked on the final major project. Once we moved to year 1 base room, we went through an awkward phase, kind of merging into tinier groups within our own, so there was no connection just yet. Right away we felt a drastic difference of approaches. We came from a pool of creativity with no wrong answers and a do whatever you want / go as crazy as you can kind of dynamic to a noticeably more rigid and formal year of pattern making and sewing. Some were less happy than others. I was kind of fine with it. On foundation I had some people criticize our uni for not providing enough skills and relying too much on the creative approach instead of practical, and then on year 1 they said the exact opposite. Too much sewing, too much emphasis on technical skills, and no room for experimentation. We had those people freak out saying that our creativity was being stifled and there was no room to design, and I feel like I have to mention the reasoning because I think it's valid. Drastic change of approaches is bad for creativity. Well, yes, I can see how that's a negative when we've just been told to experiment, now we're pulled back to do the exact opposite. Being marked on accuracy, that was a big one. Some girls had nearly no experience on sewing prior to foundation final major projects, so starting a year off with a strong emphasis on accuracy was hurting their motivation and creative flow. Working restrictive projects. That year we had 3 projects, which were all centered around the basics: white shirt, blue jeans, and black dress. There were color restrictions for the first project, restrictions in material for the second project, and restrictions in color for the last one as well. All of the above is valid criticism, however that all depends on how you look at it. I feel like every designer needs to know the basics and advance their sewing skills for better experimentation and to ease the process of design development. One just has to see the bigger picture, since the course is structured for 4 years. Even though the first 2 seem to contradict each other, they still start working in tandem once you reach year 3 and are polished on year 4. Also, in order for us to have a bit of an easier time adapting, we had amazing technicians helping us, teaching us all of the tips and tricks they knew, or as Zulfia called them, life hacks. So I think we really got the best training we could get. We aren't simply thrown into the water without being taught how to swim. Like, we started the year learning standard seams, basic finishings, and ways of creating structure. Accuracy points forced us to focus on perfecting our skills that much more, and in process advance in sewing a lot faster than we would have otherwise. Come on, no one expected us to be amazing from the first try, so I think looking at it from the lens of the Russians saying first pancake is always lumpy is the way to go. Although I can't see how all of us wanted to do our best and those accuracy points just would bring us down if they didn't match our expectations, which happen quite often. So there is for sure a negative side to this, I can agree. Basics are essentially the building blocks. How are we supposed to start an extremely complicated piece of work, let's say a deconstructed corset, if we've never made a basic shirt before? Especially when no one wanted anything basic from us to begin with. When we had a white shirt project, we were restricted to using white, but that was the only limitation placed on us. With the denim project, we had to use the same denim, but we were allowed to do whatever, and with the black dress, anything went, as long as it resembled a dress in the end. I even attempted to recycle like some old black jeans for the project, but still ended up buying a lot of my fabric because I just didn't know how to work with existing pieces just yet. This was the first time we had to make a 10 to 20 pages of portfolio with a technical drawing of the outcome, mood boards, process, design development, and in later cases also the photo shoot, but not for this one. These requirements would continue over to the rest of our projects till the end of the university, but would become more complex and detailed as we moved up in levels. Apart from studio practice, we also had CNCS, which are critical and cultural studies, essentially like fashion history lectures where we would do some presentations and write some essays on the chosen topic. Also fashion illustration sessions where a model, we would dress up in a very sculptural outfit, sometimes even way too sculptural, and we would draw experimental exaggerated pose of hers. Something I have to mention from that year, we felt a lack of connection to a course leader just because we only had her once a week, and we always felt like those tutorials were the most beneficial to our creative thinking. But again, she's the course leader, so that was to be expected because she has to run 3 levels at the same time. With the girls, we hadn't yet reached the level of communication that would be helpful enough to recreate the same environment as we had with a course leader, so we felt like that part lacked a little. If I have anyone from BHSAD watching right now, I feel like introducing another tutor focusing on creative thinking and design development could be very beneficial for level 4. Again, I was on level 4 3 years ago at this point, so maybe there have been some changes made already from those endless MFQs we have to fill every assessment. Generally, I feel the university listened to our needs and responded with action in a short period of time, so I wouldn't be surprised if the course looks different already. Honorable mention, as year 1 students, we had 2 weeks helping graduating students with their collections. It's a really cool practice where we get to see and work on the more complicated pieces and have a peek into what awaits us. Usually, the tasks don't involve us actually sewing the final pieces, as every graduating student is typically a bit of a control freak and knows their work much better than they can explain. So level 4 students are usually helping with smaller tasks such as developing alternative finishing options, which I was doing, working on textiles, embroidery, applique, patchwork, that kind of thing. Some are also asked to help backstage at the Mercedes-Benz Fashion Week once the degree collections are presented there. To sum up, that year I learned quite a bit more than just fundamentals of sewing. We used sewing machines, industrial ones, industrial press, overlocker, working a bit on the flat fell jersey machine that everybody hated, worked with existing patterns, learned to alter them, and learned to make our own from the creative work on the stand. We were allowed to introduce printing into our project, so I dove a bit deeper into silkscreen with buffing and used laser cut for the first time. I also signed up for a corset workshop, so I made my first super ugly but proper corset there. So this year again was pretty good. Also stressful though, because learning a new skill and being marked on it is a challenge. I still remember stressing over the fact that I accidentally sewed over my finger, and my immediate reaction was not to get band-aids or hydrogen peroxide, no, it was not to get any blood on my white shirt I was working on. Didn't even bother to notice the pain level at this point, because not fucking up that shirt was way more important. So keywords from the first year of bachelor's degree would be technical skills, accuracy, computer input, adaptation, mistakes, and learning. So, year 2 of bachelor's degree, 3rd year in general, or level 5 in uni terms, very confusing. Again, we had less people this time. 1 girl took a gap year, 1 stayed on level 4 repeating the course, and 1 dropped out, so on level 5 we were left with 13 people. Like I've mentioned, this year was meant for teaching us how to combine the previous 2 drastically different years into one and make the skills work for each other, introducing some new ones along the way obviously. We had 3 projects that year, starting with a formal jacket, followed up by an industry collaboration project with a focus on sustainability, which I was very excited about obviously, and finishing up with a stretch project. First project, formal jacket, we started with a mini project called Carpenter's Chair, where we were taught to manipulate darts on a mannequin in an experimental way to achieve a way less basic looking dart on a tailor jacket. After that, we started the actual project called Tinker Tailor, where like always we did a bunch of research and textile experiments. That project was the first one where it felt like my aesthetic of working in a sketchbook was actually good. For the actual project, I didn't really like it that much. I think that most of us were feeling similarly unhappy with our outcomes. Some did great, amazing actually, but it feels like all of us had developed an imposter syndrome. Every time we would compliment a person, they felt they didn't deserve it, or they were unsatisfied with their outcome, so didn't accept the compliment. That was the first project where we didn't have have to do a full-on portfolio afterwards, and probably the reason why none of us felt compelled to do the photo shoot of the outcome. Well, that and also us hating our project, so yeah. But Honga wished she did a photo shoot because her garment was deemed amazing by our entire group, so I'm still hoping she does it someday. Every year on level 5 we have the industry collaboration project, and typically we would also have a separate sustainability focused project, but this year both of those were merged into one and we had a collaboration with H&M. It was a longer project, broken into 2 parts, the design portion and communication portion. Working on that was very exciting for me because the only good thing I got from that Russian college I attended to before BHSAD was the environment course that I took on and got super passionate about. So we had Russian H&M conscious representatives come in giving a presentation and bring us a box of about 60 discard items to recycle and turn into a bespoke piece of clothing. I have a full process video from start to finish on my channel, so I'll link it up here in case you want to check it out as well. Since the previous years collaborated with All Saints and Paul Smith, we were not expecting to see a fast fashion brand as our collaborator, but once we were told this was a recycling focused initiative, this made a bit more sense. It was a challenge to work with existing prints on fabric and introducing a new language to clothing pieces that already had their own, but we were encouraged to layer process and make the initial garments unrecognizable. It was very challenging for some of us. Anna, for example, hated her entire box and had to change the colors of nearly all the pieces that she got in order to even be able to look at them. I was very lucky in that sense because I got the color palette from my box right away, but I guess the stars just aligned that day for me. If you remember me saying how I failed in introducing recycling elements in my black dress project on year 1 of BA, you'll get why I got so excited over the fact that the workflow of this project was uninterrupted and smooth. Since we had a full second part focusing on communications, we had to do a full-on photo shoot, portfolio and a lookbook, all of which would be showcased in a mini exhibition in our uni and presented in front of the H&M representatives. Thanks to that project and my friend Masha from graphic design, I got invited to speak at a sustainable fashion conference organized by Asia Mickiewicz for Pokolenie Zero, which later opened up the doors for me to speak at another 3 conferences, which was just wild. Final project of that year focused on jersey. It wasn't my best work, but I loved working on the digital printer that our uni had just acquired that year, so you best believe we abused it to the maximum. My outcome was not the best, but the whole group agreed that Alisa did amazing in that project, both in the garment that she created, but especially in her presentation and visual communication. During that project, we were crammed into a small room so that the graduating level would have a bit more space to finalize the work, since there were about 25 of them and their projects were huge. I worked on that dreadful flat felt sewing machine, which I hated a little less at this point. Did a bunch of digital and screen printing, plus recycled old clothing of mine for the final piece after getting some confidence from the sustainability project. Like always, we wrote 2 essays that year and had fun fashion illustration sessions, plus a bunch of CNCS lectures. Our lecturer Ludmila also invited us to participate in her Razarchivace project, where everyone brought old clothing to cut up and weave into a bunch of wall hangings which later got attached to each other. She also got some of us to submit our black dresses for fashion theory that was published in Russian translation, which was really cool. To sum up, this year was great at merging our skills and preparing us for the final year. The only thing I personally feel was lacking a little was working with heavy fabrics and outerwear. I know the year before us did their collaboration with Paul Smith and did a bunch of jackets and coats, which almost none of us did for our degree collections, and that's probably why. From the positives, much better sleep schedule. We sort of learned to find a way to manage the workload a bit better, but that said, we would still pull an all-nighter before assessment like always. Perhaps because we didn't really love the jacket or the jersey projects, and because they felt a little rushed, that was the reason why we were less stressed out about the outcome, but that's a guess. We learned to do a proper presentation in front of people. That was a bit stressful, but our course leader organized multiple practice lessons for us where she explained the basics of public speaking, told us how to project our voices and how to interact with an audience and so on. Industry collaboration. It was an interesting experience, and some of us got a chance to be featured in a Bureau 24/7 online article, which was nice. With the girls, we got closer and closer, and by the end we became very tight-knit, visiting each other and going out together. On to the negatives though. No preparation for the outerwear construction that I mentioned already, but that should be in the negatives. Regarding the H&M project, we felt that the collaboration exposure generally lacked. Judging by other universities' collaborations like Amphi had with Zara or HSE had with Uniqlo, who had a bunch of media coverage, shows and in-store exhibitions, we were underwhelmed. I know that the year after us had the opposite experience, so that is a good sign that our feedback was being listened to. We can cut some slack to our PR department because that was a new collaboration for us and all the kinks were not tested out just yet. We just wish we weren't the guinea pigs in this situation, but I guess somebody has to be. Keywords from this year. year would be aesthetics, recycling, collaboration, visual communication, presentation, public speaking, and imposter syndrome. So, level 6, or the graduating year. We had one girl drop out at the start of the year, another one after the first semester, and another one take a gap year sometime near the beginning of the second semester, so we're left with 10 people. The last year essentially was entirely dedicated to us developing our degree collections. The summer before, we had to come up with a proposal to present in front of the group and start developing the most successful idea. I made a short inspiration video for my proposal, and it's interesting how much the initial idea has evolved and transformed into an almost entirely different topic upon me working on it for a year. First half of the year was mostly textile development. Despite the fact that our course is called fashion design and not textile design, our course leader has made sure to cultivate as many skills in us as possible so that we would have a bit of a wider range of possibilities after graduation. Although the first semester was focusing on textiles, we still had to evolve our concepts, research as much as possible, develop designs to submit 50 looks, 30 samples, and 2 garment toiles for the first assessment. After the Christmas break, almost all of us hated our collections and wanted to change everything about them. As Claire convinced us, that was a completely normal cycle for a collection to go through, and that nearly every degree student experiences these emotions. I went from crazy vibrant, funny looking graphic prints to a muted colour palette, more sculptural silhouettes, and a more hands-on printing method. I made some lino cut prints and continued developing the collection research to find another new direction for the project. At this point, the weekly lineup process had begun, and we started rushing on collections quite a bit because the May 23rd deadline was creeping in, which we had to create 6 full looks by. Somewhere in the second month of semester B, we got our year 1 helpers abiders in the collection making process, because at this point we had to finalize at least 1 or 2 looks already. It was interesting because I feel our personalities of the 2 groups matched well together, and the studio was filled with double the people with fun ideas and fresh minds. Poor Lisa, my helper, she had to make a new lino cut piece for me because the one I made had a fucking typo and I couldn't afford to spend another 10 plus hours on the thing. Most of us had about 4 looks figured out and 2 in the making when we got the news that the university was going to close its doors for the first lockdown. Like the rest of the world, none of us knew how to react to this information, and at first we thought that this was only going to take about a month and everything was going to go back to normal, but obviously that wasn't the case. So the collection was turned digital and we were not expected to produce it out of our own bedrooms, which was great. We had a digital submission and were awaiting the time when the university would open up its doors again, letting people in. By that time, we would have already received our grades, we would have thought everything through, and we would be ready to sew the collection during the summertime. Our groupmate Hong left to sit out this lockdown with her family in Korea, and after the first lockdown when the restrictions were lifted, I also left home to Tallinn to renew my visa. Well, if you watched any of my videos recently, you know that I'm still here, kind of stuck, working on the degree collection from Estonia. I had some textiles sent to me from Moscow, and I am actually currently waiting for another package to arrive so that I could finalize some of the other looks. I missed the graduation, missed the degree exhibition because I wasn't allowed to enter the country, and I'm still looking for ways to do that, to be honest. This year has been tumultuous, strange, and full of unexpected turns, but when it comes to our group, I think it wasn't that bad. We became closer than ever, organizing tea parties with homemade sweets, Secret Santa with token pieces of our degree collections as gifts, and we organized a clothing swap in our uni and spent our birthdays together. Obviously all of that before the whole thing in the world, right? But during the lockdown, during the online Zoom sessions, we kind of managed to stay organized enough to finish everything on time. I haven't seen the girls after the lockdown, but I know they did their best to construct their degree collections in this new environment with temperature checks, 2-meter distance, and working in masks. They've told me it was very stressful trying to cram in everything before the exhibition and organizing said exhibition without our course leader present, but they managed and did a great job at that and can finally catch a break. While they're doing that, we can talk positives from this year. As a group, we grew together and got a very clear understanding of each other's styles of work, which in turn helped us learn how to give each other constructive criticism. It was the first time we worked on multiple garments at once and started thinking in collection terms. This built a next level understanding of a cohesive design process. We learned to play with proportions, silhouette, color, print across looks, inserting details from one another to connect the pieces and harmonize the collection. Like with anything you work on for a long period of time, your technical skills get way better, so our sewing skills got refined. Visual communication evolved with us building a professional portfolio of work, combining our old projects but emphasizing the degree collection as it is the best piece of work we've done so far. As young designers, we get to shape the industry we're coming into. Thanks to other young, talented and driven people like stylists, makeup artists, photographers, videographers, we get to present our vision for a larger audience with a collaborative effort, slowly building a network of creative individuals. The only negatives from this year, excluding the obvious circumstantial ones 2020 had presented us with, I think perhaps dedicating a full semester to textile development isn't ideal, especially for those who definitely don't want to focus on textile development all that much. And then that age-old argument that our school doesn't prepare you for the real world. We get to experience a very unique environment that isn't exactly a realistic representation of a potential job that we'll get upon graduating. Most likely for our first jobs as fashion designers, we'll have to focus on less creatively demanding tasks such as color boards, trend research, and technical illustrations. And that's if running errands is out of the equation. But this is quite often how a first job straight out of uni looks like for most graduates, not just for us in creative fields. I don't want to normalize this practice, and I do feel hopeful as to what us as a generation of young fashion designers can accomplish, so I choose to focus on the next three things. First of all, I'm building my portfolio with additional projects. I'm currently continuing the degree collection, but I'm planning on creating a capsule, more commercial looking collection after I'm done with this one. Second of all is talking to other industry professionals, getting their feedback. This I find very helpful. I sent out my portfolio to different people, some from sustainable design, more luxury brands, and a trend forecaster, so I got a range of feedback, which is always great. And third one is, while applying to jobs that can give experience in the real world, I am constantly researching subjects to expand my professional knowledge. This is to gain more weight in the flooded job market and to stand out amongst other new graduates when looking to switch up the position to find something more exciting than the one position that you might find right now. And the key ones from the final year of my university experience would be confidence, collection thinking, refinement, connection, portfolio, and balance. On the last note, a bit of our unique situation as 2020 graduates. We had our Mercedes-Benz Fashion Week show cancelled and had a very tiny graduation. Of course, those things don't matter in the grand scheme of things, and we're all very happy that we're healthy and okay. However, we have been working towards all of those things for the past 4 years and unfortunately didn't get a chance to showcase our work in the same way that the last 10 years of graduates did. We hope that when the world comes back to normal, we will be able to attend Mercedes-Benz Fashion Week with our collections and organize another proper exhibition to feel like this chapter of our lives has come to a close with an exclamation point and not a question mark. I'm extremely grateful for everything that these past 4 years have brought to me. The skills, the mindset, and the work ethic, but most of all the people I've had the pleasure of meeting along the way. Thank you girls for becoming my second family, and thank you BHSAD for making me the person I am today, who is resilient, responsible, truly creative and environmentally conscious. And that has been my CV. Thank you for watching. Hire me. Okay, bye.